Just tell me. We were talking a little bit before we got on the air about true crime and how you did. I believe you were an expert for the list when they were doing an episode about this. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So tell me some interesting facts about true crime or its audience.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So I learned during this whole process of filmmaking that true crime audience is about 75% female, which, is a shocking statistic because that's a huge, huge number. It's so funny. A while ago, I read this article in New York Times and it talked about this. And as I was reading the article, I was like, because all I watch is true crime. I mean, that's all I watch. My
Mhm.
husband thinks I'm a crazy person. And when I want to relax, I watch true crime. And he's like, this is not relaxing. He's like, can we watch a comedy or something, funny? And it's just, I don't know. I've always been drawn to true crime. And I've often wondered about myself, like, why is this? Like, it's so dark and it's so sad. And not only that, it scares the crap out of me. I can't sleep at night. I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? I don't know. And then I read this New York Times article and it was fascinating because it was just eye opening. I was reading it and I was like, oh my God, like this is exactly me. They're talking about me in this article. And I guess it's not just me, it's, this 75% of the audience who is all female. And what it talked about was that women watch true crime, not just as entertainment, but almost for education. Women want to understand what triggers a crime. So watching these stories shows them what happened and what they can try and avoid, or what they can do, how they can change their behaviors if they're ever in this unfortunate situation, how they can get out of it, and things like that. It's just really, really interesting. And some of the statistics were that women's fear of crime is 3 times higher than that of their male counterparts. And so we walk around on an everyday basis, as I do, very aware of my surroundings, scared that somebody could do something, to you. And we're physically smaller and such, so there's all those things that come into play. But yeah, women will watch these shows and often change their behavior based on what they see. One example is, I remember being very young and reading about the Central Park jogger.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
never, ever, ever went jogging in a park in my entire life, ever. That story was so ingrained in my brain that to me, it's like jogging in a park meant being attacked. And that was it. And I changed my behavior for my whole entire life. I never went jogging in a park ever. And I think women do that. They'll watch these things. And that's why we avoid, dark streets at night, or we don't walk through a parking lot alone. I mean, I know women, myself included, who are, when they're home alone, will even block the front door. Like, other than
Mhm.
locking it, it'll put like a bag of recycling in front of it, or glass bottles, or something that you would hear if somebody came in, even in your sleep. All kinds of things like that. And then women will see these stories and use some of what happened as life-saving tactics. Like, one other thing that I'll never forget, I saw on a true crime show decades ago, is a woman was put in a trunk of a car. And I never knew this before, but I've never forgotten it since, that once you're inside a trunk, you can actually kick out the tail light from the inside. And
Mhm.
then you can stick your arm out or stick your
Yeah.
leg out. And then, of course, anyone driving behind a car with a leg sticking out of the tail light is going to, call the cops or question what's going on. So it's just, I think that's part of the reason we're so drawn to true crime. It's just really interesting.
So I have so many things to say to what you just said, but the first I want to start with something that I just remembered, and I've never talked about this on the podcast before, and I don't know why I keep forgetting this, but technically, I was on a true crime show. Uh, well, really, it was about my mother, but she was pregnant with me when the incident happened. So I was technically on there as well, even though neither of us are really on there. So what it was is when my mother was pregnant with me, she lived in a trailer, and I lived in a trailer for the first few years of my life too. But there was somebody who was high and had been like a 3 to 4 day bender or something like that, and they broke into her trailer where she was sleeping alone and put a knife to her neck. And I don't remember if he was asking for money or what he said he was going to do, whatever. But my mother, being my mother, shoves him off. She's like 8 months pregnant, by the way. She's 8. She shoves him off and then like runs away, like from a dead
Good
asleep
for
with a knife
her.
to your throat. She shoves the guy and runs away. And I'm like, what? It's like, first of all, that sounds like my mom, but also it's just insane. And I forget that. But so they did a Rescue 911 used to be a show back in like the 80s, I think, or something
Yeah.
like that. And so they would do stories about stuff like that. And they did a story on this guy, but they followed him from like before that all the way through. So my mom's part is just like a very small part of it, but they show, and she used to have a tape of it. We'd watch it. I'm like, this is really messed up. That's supposed to be you almost dying when you were pregnant with me. It's like, we should not be saving this on like a VHS tape to watch around family reunions and stuff like that, or whatever.
Well, one, you got to send me this tape to see. And two, I love your mom and I want to meet her now.
Yeah, I forget, but I always forget about that. And then you, for some reason, when you were talking about it, it popped in my head right towards the end. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess we've kind of been on one of those true crime shows. We're like one of the old ones, 30 some years ago or whatever. But yeah, I
Crazy.
believe that 75% of the audience for true crime shows are women because 75% of the participants are men. So that makes sense to me that the audience would largely be women because men don't want to watch themselves work, right? But but to be like, and we were talking about this before we got on the air, excuse me, my girlfriend watches them nonstop, and she has found what I think has to be. It seems so ridiculous. If you'll probably know what I'm talking about, but if nobody's ever heard of it, I think I'm making it up. There's a woman, excuse me, who I think she has a YouTube channel and stuff like that, or whatever. She tells true crime stories while she does her
Doing me
makeup.
makeup.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I
See, I knew you
love
were gonna
her.
know. Yeah, she watches her non-stop. She watches her so often. And I can hear that girl's voice in my head right now. And yeah, she watches them all the time. And they even made that sketch recently on SNL about how girls watch all these murder shows and stuff like that as soon as their partner
Yes.
leaves or whatever. So I had never considered that it would be to learn how to avoid the situations. I'm pretty sure my girlfriend's watching it to know how not to get caught when she eventually kills me. But that's a very interesting. I would never have thought about that. But I can tell you one funny thing, and I'll quit rambling here soon. Um, is anytime that I'm walking behind a woman late at night, I am terrified that I come off as creepy or that she thinks that I'm going to do something to her. So I remember one time I went when I still lived in Tampa. I went running along Bayshore Boulevard, which is a super long sidewalk there. And I was walking back to my car, and it's pitch black. And there's a small white girl in front of me. So, I'm a black man, right? And I had my shirt off at this time or whatever. And I'm like walking up behind her, and late at night, I'm trying to keep this distance, and I'm trying to like click my car so far away so she sees that I'm actually going somewhere. I'm not just following her and everything like that. So I do say that for guys who are not actually trying to murder you, we are also terrified in that situation, and we don't want to be there either. So it's bad for both of us, right? Obviously, worse for women. I'm not trying to make a false comparison there or anything like that, but uh,
I agree with you. I've had this conversation with my husband, and he's like, sometimes we've had this conversation before where he'll sense that somebody is scared of him, his presence.
mm,
And
yeah,
it's so sad because he's one of the people that if anything went down, he would jump in to help you, but just based on appearance and whatever, women's just fear, they obviously don't think that, and I don't think that either when I see random dudes and I'm outside or whatever. But the funny thing about that is because you're one of the good ones, but I can't tell you how many times I myself just walking down the street and it's just me and some other guy just walking down. And as soon as they walk past you, they say something totally inappropriate just as they're passing,
yeah.
they're close to you, and it's just so intimidating and it angers you, but you're like, I'm not going to make this a scene. I'm not going to, escalate this. I just have to ignore it and keep going so it doesn't get worse. And it's just
Mhm.
unfortunate, for obviously for the good ones like you, it's terrible. And for women, I mean, it's just you just have to assume the worst all the time so you can kind of be safe, right? Otherwise it just sucks. The
Yeah.
whole thing, yeah, the whole thing just sucks. But it's so funny that sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna go, further corroborate your point there, and just saying like, yeah, my uncomfort in that discomfort, excuse me, in that situation is so superficial that it ultimately doesn't matter. I just think it's funny because like, there's a comedian I recently saw who talks about the girls in those situations for guys like me who aren't trying to do
Yeah.
anything could totally rob me. I would be like totally so. I would just give her whatever she asked for because I'd be so freaked out of just the energy in the situation. I'd just throw my wallet at her and try to run away or something like that, right? So sorry. So please
I'll
continue.
keep that in mind next time I'm in this scenario. I'll be like,
Yeah.
wait, I
Well,
could turn this around.
I'm never going to New York again, just because now I know that you know my secret and you'll rob me immediately.
I was gonna say it's so funny that you bring up that girl who tells the murder, true crime stories while doing her makeup because I saw her for the first time like 2 weeks ago. I'd never heard of her before, and I was like, "What is this? And what is happening?" And as somebody with a background in fashion and loves makeup, and now this true crime documentaries, I was like, "Oh man, this is great. What is happening here?" But she's hilarious, and I don't know if hilarious is the right word in when she's talking about true crime, but it's very fascinating
Her
what she does.
delivery is relatively funny because her tone never really shifts, even though she's
Yes.
talking about heinous things, and it's never really it like never it stays balanced and everything, and the whole time, and she's and I guess you have to be calm when you're holding something sharp like a millimeter from your eye or whatever, but still, uh, yeah. So but
Yeah.
just it's like I said when before we got on the air, you talked about this too. I'm like, as soon as you started talking about the true crime stuff and 75% of women, I'm like, well, my girlfriend's one of those 75% because that is like 90% of what she watches. And then she tells me about them later and she's like, isn't this crazy? I'm like, no, I'm like, people are stupid and they do stupid things. None of this is crazy to me. I hate people. Right. And so she's always telling me all these different stories. So I know so many of these things just from that. And like I said, the woman who does her makeup all telling these stories. So it's just
Well,
crazy to
my
me.
poor husband watches it all with me, all of it. And so I drag him through these over and over and over again. It's
I'm forever grateful that my girlfriend does not insist on me watching them with her. I just have to hear recaps every so often, but she totally watches them alone, and I don't invite her to watch my stupid stuff either. So we all have our thing. Thanks for checking out Starting Nowhere. Come find us on Facebook so you can comment on this and other clips and episodes of Starting Nowhere.